Hi, I'm Martin.
This is Shuki.
Today we will be talking about Robert Crumb. I think it's a well-timed show to be discussing his work. Just earlier this year, his truly terrific biography written by Dan Nadel, curator at the Whitney Museum of American Art, has been published, and he also currently has a show opening up at David Zwirner in Los Angeles. And lastly, I am also very excited to say that I'm organizing a show of his work in London as well in November of this year. On to you, Shuti, or should I perhaps start with a small introduction into who Robert Crumb is?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea since you're very much involved in the
show,
yes.
Well, I mean, in a way, I think, Robert Crumb is an American underground comic artist. One might say a cartoonist, but I think he's an awful lot more than that.
When was he born?
Well, he was born in the 1940s. I'm not quite sure. I think 1944 in Pennsylvania. Grew up in a Midwestern family. His father was in the military. His siblings were quite troubled people. His mother, had a very unstable personality, and also, a quite troubled family, really. But I think, he's a crucial figure in that he came to the fore in the 1960s around the time of the hippie movement and counterculture. And he really came to expand the medium of comics. I mean, we all know Mickey Mouse, Walt Disney, Batman, Superman, and what have you. And in a way, he, alongside other figures such as Harvey Kurtzman from Mad, have been able to turn the comic medium, really a popular medium initially, into something that tackles deeply important philosophical issues and also the darker side of human nature. And so I think he's really someone to really compare to figures such as Hogarth and also Bruegel in showing a mirror to society, and in a way also embodying the sickness in American society from the 1960s onwards.
So why were you so interested in Crumb as an artist in the first place?
Well, I should say I didn't really have a choice. So my father was a great fan of his work, and is a great fan of his work. And so as a child, I would occasionally go with my father to the south of France where he lives. It's a little town called Sauve, pretty close to Arles and Montpellier. And I would dwell in this medieval town with my father and Robert, and, he's this kind of person, art would be a part of his life. You go to a restaurant and he will start drawing on the tablecloths, and his neighbor, Pete Poblaski, a former Marvel cartoonist and also a great painter in his own right, they inhabited a certain kind of world. And so I first became to appreciate Robert as a person, and perhaps also the strangeness of living in this medieval town and going to cafes and drawing all day. And, his neighbor would often dress up as Zorro, and I remember seeing them fence on the streets. I mean, it seems like a quite surreal world. And then only later, obviously as a little child, you're not supposed to, see some of his darker work involving nudity, explicit content, racism, sexism, and what have you. So that took a longer while.
Yeah, he sounds like I don't know Robert Crumb at all, really. So only recently I've been starting to look at his work, and also saw the fantastic documentary that he's done about his sort of the first part of his life.
Oh, well, you mean the Terry Zwigoff one, the one that was published, well, it came out in 1994, I
something
believe.
like that.
Yeah, that's a quite.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, he from his work and from these interviews and documentaries, he seems like he's weird.
Yes, and I think
I mean, definitely not your ordinary person.
no, he's quite weird, and his work is really also very much about his weirdness. So, just for the uninitiated, it's this, I think he, this very slim, bony kind of man with a beard and then
very thick glasses that make him look a bit goggle-eyed.
And he looks like he's from the early 20th century, often wearing a hat. And he has this, or at least certainly he used to, I'm not sure about now because frankly he's in his 80s, but he had a very profound obsession for women, particularly those with protruding buttocks and very muscular girls that you can
sturdy
girls,
and powerful.
Sturdy girls that you can ride around on, and
yes, and apparently he did literally ride around girls.
Yeah. And so his work is really exploring. I'd say all of his comics really explore the limits of decency. But I'd say there's a particularly pronounced element, particularly after the 1960s, of exploring his own inner psychology through comics, making fun of himself while also acknowledging his own nature, and perhaps also suggesting that what he is feeling and his obsessions, there's something somewhat more universal than we may at first want to publicly acknowledge. I mean, of course, all of these ideas of these sturdy women and grotesque sexual scenes, they don't come from nowhere. They are part of public culture, even if we don't acknowledge it being so.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, when I'm reading Crumb, there's a lot of it I don't really understand. I mean, as in not like literally like whether I understand the text or not, but as in I don't feel very connected to the culture, the visual culture, or the culture or even the sentiments, the feelings that he is trying to say in all of these comics. Because I think in a way I'm very the opposite of what Crumb is from a lot of sides. Like he's a kind of a I don't know, how does he describe himself? He was like kind of bullied didn't come from a comfortable family, and he's had trouble growing up.
He's a complete nerd.
Complete nerd. I mean, he's
totally unfit, a wimp.
Yes, I mean, he's had a lot of trouble chasing after a woman when he was younger, which is why apparently he has all of these feelings
towards... Well, when he
became
successful, that changed.
Yeah, I know, but that's turning point. But like in teenage years.
Yeah.
Like at schools and stuff. And he grew up in like Philadelphia in America, and in the 60s. Like all of this is extremely foreign to me.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Like, I mean, like a lot of these images, like the ones with these, I don't know, black women or that's depicted in a very racist way on today's standard, because it's like this very racist image.
Angel Foot McSpade,
Yeah, I mean, like, I've seen it on history books, but it literally means nothing to me.
Interesting.
Like, I know what it means. I know it's supposed to be really racist, but like, I've only literally seen it in history books.
Well, I guess with culture, I mean, everything has its own context. I mean, I certainly don't believe in this idea that we're all part of this global society. And that, I mean, I don't want to digress, but I feel quite cynical about the idea of this one universal art world with, people in Saudi Arabia collecting Gerd Richter just as much as people in China, because obviously we all come from a different cultural context, and so of course your understanding of Crumb's work will be fundamentally different to someone who grew up in the cultural context of the 1960s. But yet it does seem quite relatable to me, because I don't think that, I think that, in some cases you have like, quite explicit tropes of a certain historical moment, such as, the Negro depictions that he draws on when illustrating Angelfoot McSpade, or, the hippie archetype in the case of Mr. Natural. I think there are more universal themes at play as well. And, this element of acknowledging the weirdness of us all.
Yeah, for sure. But including the things that he draws about kind of like grabbing women and things like that.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, from my perspective, it's like, I can't really relate to the sentiment of that.
Do you think it has to do around gender? I can certainly, of course it's part of my, even though I would never do that. Occasionally I see a woman walking across the street and I think, wow.
I know, I think...
And, conceivably, following my base human nature, ignoring any consequences. Yeah, sure, maybe I would want to grab her bum.
I think it's definitely a gendered thing. And also like in the documentary, they had like a couple of, I don't know, it's like his female friends or something.
Yeah.
They came up to him to say like, oh, I really appreciated your work, because I think also including like Rebecca Warren or people like that.
No, she wasn't included. That was before time.
No, yeah. I know. But like the sentiment is that the way he's represented woman is not the skinny type of woman that's like perfect, but whereas there's sort of robust women, which are kind of their body, represents their body.
Yeah.
That's how they've sort of relate to the work, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think that for me also doesn't relate.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite like all of his work is a little bit alien to me. It's just like, I think it's very nice drawings and the stories are kind of like weirdly interesting, but like the sentiment behind it, I find it quite difficult to deeply engage with it. But then I also agree with you in the sense that some of the things that he does, I think it's interesting in representing and sort of not destroying, but like reversing this idea of this sort of respectability and this very happiness and this notion of, I don't know, everyone can be happy in America. And this like American middle class society of being so, like polite and respectable and... But I think he goes far beyond that, because this trope of the respectable American society, that's really something that only existed in the 1950s. Okay.
And I think he goes far beyond that. You don't need to, live in your, little cottages in 1950s America and live in progress to you can question the limits of social decency even in our society in modern Britain, where obviously you have a lot of people who are, in his words, phonies. People who are inauthentic, who uphold certain values they don't live by. I think what Crumb's work is about is a certain kind of authenticity. I think, I don't want to digress, but I think Crumb's work is crucially about exploring the inner psychology and showing what is there, showing what is in culture, showing how messed up we are. And I think, he does it through himself, because obviously doing it through your own flesh, it's a good foil, because you're not directly poking the finger at other people necessarily. Of course, he also obviously does that, but taking the piss out of yourself affords you the possibility to go even further without consequences. And I think he was quite inspired by Mark Twain. I mean, I should note he grew up in a deeply Catholic family, but obviously you have this idea of how you ought to live your life, and blame and guilt and whatnot. But from an early age, he was drawn to Mark Twain, who dismissed much of the moral language around blame. I mean, there's a quote I very much like, in fact, one that he would note down in one of his drawings. It is, I'm quoting, "It is my conviction that the human race is no proper target for harsh words and bitter criticisms, and that the only justifiable feeling toward it is compassion. It did not invent itself, and it had nothing to do with the planning of this weak and foolish character." From the autobiography of Mark Twain. And so I think, there's this element of, just showing what is there. And that's what he really does in his work. And I don't think he's in a way was able to liberate himself from too strong ideas of moral censor and how you're supposed to portray yourself. And I think he wants his art to be fundamentally and truly authentic.
Interesting. Like, do you have a sort of example of how it's being authentic?
Well, I mean, I think, in many of his works he will portray himself, stalking a big woman, raping her. Maybe he has fantasies of being able to screw her head off and then fucking her without having to talk with her. I mean, there's a certain kind of authenticity in that very perspective, in that it authentically honors an impulse that he feels, and one that is definitely relatable. I mean, it's not that people go around wanting that, but it's still an impulse that exists among probably all men. I mean, of course, all of us, at least all the ones that aren't like,
Yeah, sure. But like, I mean, a lot of the things that he does sometimes is also very ambiguous, no? Like, especially works that doesn't involve himself.
Yeah.
Like the two comics I suggested to me earlier today, which is...
that was When the Niggers Take Over the World and When the Goddamn Jews Take Over the World. I mean, they're probably among his most racist works.
Yeah.
But it's really the same logic. I mean, so these two comics, they're deeply racist in the portrayal of black people and Jews, stingy, money-grabbing, greedy, inhumane portrayal of Jews that you might also remember from The Merchant of Venice or what have you, and of black people and how they end up conquering or taking over the world, and it all leads to destruction. But, I think there's something deeply authentic about that, because obviously these racist stereotypes, they are part of our visual culture, they're part of our culture. And so, he's doing the opposite of brushing it beneath the table. I mean, of course they are part of public culture, and, there's a certain hypocrisy in denying it. I think that it ties very much in with this kind of authentic portrayal of the world we live in. And I think that's what makes it important as a work. It's important art historically, because I think, contrary to what you said, I think his work is very relevant to our sense of self-understanding, and I think it is very relatable. I mean, of course we can relate and take up these stereotypes of the Jews, not least with the Israel-Palestine war looming at the moment.
But I think from when I was reading these two comics, I think it's not just about whether it reflects our, like, the things that's in our visual culture. I think a lot of his work, including the works about himself, it's so much I don't feel like I'm not sure if he's thinking so deeply about reflecting culture in that sense. It's not so rational, I think.
I'd be inclined to agree, yeah.
I think it's something more, in a way, more impulsive, more from himself. And I think I think all of his work is so much reflection of fear.
Yeah, I think that's very apt. I mean, I think, his work is important because it touches on these broader themes, but I think it comes from a very impulsive place. I mean, with many of the works, he collects a lot of stuff and, he reads a lot, but it's always kind of like cherry picking what comes his way. And it's really it's a reflection of what comes his way and what piques his interest in that very moment.
He's also said in the past that he did quite a bit of LSD back in the 60s, and a lot of his characters all came from that one trip, apparently. That he had. And what LSD did for him was to, apparently that's what LSD does for everyone, to get rid of your ego and have you stop thinking about what is the right thing to do and just let it go and just do it. And that's part of his creativity. And I think including things like what's that title, when the niggers taken over the world,
Take Over America,
Take Over America or something, like these comics, it reflects a sense of fear in our society that still exists, I think.
Absolutely.
And it's all of these, a lot of these cultural things, they're not that rational. The reason they exist is from fear.
Yeah, of course.
And from for his personal comics as well, it's a lot about his fear towards women.
I think that's probably. I think that's very.
Why do you get rid of the woman's head? Because you're fearful in a way.
Gosh, you should be a therapist.
No, I think he knows. He knows that very well himself. He's very aware of.
Yeah. No, I think that's quite accurate. I mean, and in fact, his most recent comic, what's the name of it? It's called.
It's about
Diary of Paranoia or what?
Something like that. Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I've not yet had a look at it.
The one he did last, the last one he did was something about COVID-19.
I think, he was very, supposedly, I didn't speak to him about that, but he was supposedly quite distrustful also of the vaccines.
He's a big but like he's very interested in a lot of conspiracy theory, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I don't think all of them, but
I'm not sure how much does he believe in it, but he definitely is very interested.
In a way, a quite fearful guy, you would say.
Yeah, I was just reading the book of Genesis that he did, this series of works that he sort of illustrated the book of Genesis quite truthfully. But in the first chapter with the creation of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, when the snake that gave Eve the apple, he's kind of made it into the lizard guy, the lizard man. That is very much conspiracy theory. Do you know the story?
No.
You don't know. So there's this whole conspiracy about how the world is actually controlled by lizard people living underground.
Oh, interesting.
And they are evolved from dinosaurs back in the days. They didn't actually go away. They actually became really intelligent and live underground. Have infinite resources from the underground heat or whatever.
And perhaps to give some context. Robert, the LSD trip you mentioned, at least according to the story, that was crucially important to him in that it helped him concoct many of his characters, Mr. Natural and what have you. And that then in the 1980s he was facing this intellectual crisis, and then following that he would often take literary sources and adapt these works in his own way. So perhaps his first work of that ilk was James Boswell's London Journal, which I'm very, very excited to be showing in London. And then he did illustrations for Franz Kafka, the Book of Genesis, and also in later years he would draw tennis players like, I don't know, I guess Serena Williams in his Art and Beauty comics, and he would often say that as he got older he was more just almost like a scribe. He just kind of, he would draw off photographs and he would just try to capture the story as closely as it was written. And in fact, in the case of the Book of Genesis, he said that very thing, that all he did was really illustrate the story to the best of his abilities as it was portrayed in the text. And now I just took him at face value. It's like 225 pages or whatnot. I didn't look at every page really closely. I mean, frankly, it's not the most joyous read because it's bloody long and bloody tiring. But what you seem to suggest is that he did, in fact, contrary to his own confessions, actually put in a lot of his own self. I mean, for God's sake, a lizard man.
No, well, the thing is, it kind of does make sense in the Bible, because according to the text, apparently after God found out like Adam and Eve ate the apple, like he's gonna punish them, right? He also punished the serpent, like saying that you're gonna be going around with your tummy to the ground. So it sort of implies that they had legs and
before that.
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, but then he still chose to represent the character as a very like sci-fi lizard man,
How interesting.
So I feel like that's probably just he plays around with it a bit within limits.
How interesting. Yeah, I didn't pay attention.
You did not pay attention.
I'm of course also.
It's like the first 2 pages.
I was never a good Bible scholar, in fact. So.
But yeah, I mean, I did notice, like, it's interesting what you said about the 1980s crisis, because I did notice, like, from sort of 80s onwards, his works, like, there's so much writing on the works.
Well, they also just get a lot more detailed. I mean, the
there's
use
so
of
much more
cross-hatching
detail.
is far more thorough. And I think the draughtsmanship, I mean, in a way, I very much like the works of the 1960s because there's perhaps a certain element of innocence and a greater freedom in his work. And
I think earlier works are a bit crazier, right?
I think they're more impulsive.
Yeah.
I think they're more
like,
impulsive.
They're not rational. They're totally not rational.
But, in his later works, I think that they come across as less impulsive, more worked on. And, frankly, his, most recent works, most of them at least, are, drawn from images. And then I guess there's also the question, what's the relationship between the image and the drawing by Crumb, or the relationship between the text he adopts, like the Book of Genesis or Franz Kafka, and the images. And, of course, it's always his own contribution. Even in his works, he would paint after photographs. I mean, there's still a certain element to his line. I mean, I'd say even in his drawings, Serena Williams seems more curvy and also seductive and erotic than she would do in a photograph of a tennis match. I think, there's obviously still a certain degree of artistic freedom, even if you copy photographs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the documentary, he was saying how, like, he would pick out certain facial expressions that kind of exaggerated a little bit and make
that's in a way the job of any satirist.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I also had a question about his, like, how significant is his comic within the sort of history of comics? Because, I mean, this style of drawing that he does, I mean, I guess now I'm looking at it without knowing any, like, history of comics, American comics. Like, it doesn't seem that rare. Like, I feel like a lot of people do it like this.
Well,
now.
I think he has his own distinctive style.
Yeah, but like something like this, like quite detailed, kind of realistic. But I feel like it's not that rare now. But is this something that was like really groundbreaking back in the days, in the 60s.
No, I mean, I think he has his own distinctive style, his extensive use of cross-hatching, for instance, his slightly curved gesture to his lines. I mean, he would often paint with a crow quill, so it's like a feather, and it's a pen, and there's a certain movement to his lines. It's not like a straight line typically. It's like slightly thicker and then thinner, and there's a certain stroke to his work that I think is quite distinctive.
I think
quite recognizable. I mean, I think.
Or maybe I've just seen his work somewhere actually before.
But
I mean, I think quite interesting is that the way he's drawing, he particularly accentuates like the volume of the body, the volume of the object.
Yeah.
And the second thing he really exaggerates is put emphasis on is the texture of the object. I think that's something quite rare in comic drawings, because very often it's quite stylized and quite like clean in a way.
Well, I think it depends. I mean, I'd certainly say that about his later work, but in his earlier works, many of them, they're also... Works. But I think this element of volumes, I think that's quite good. I mean, some of his early drawings also show, like these streamlined Chevrolets in America of that particular style, and they kind of have this blown up element. They have these curves and then these streamlined chrome metal elements, so I think it maybe also fits to the time of the 1960s, a lot of chrome and I mean, I'm also not a comic expert, so I frankly feel I'm quite out of my depth there, but I think crucially, the way the issues his comics tackle, they're very much in the vein of Mad comics, which were of course a crucial influence to him, as well as to other underground comic artists.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps, that moves us on to the question, how should one place Crumb? I mean, I think, nowadays, people, certainly in the art community, they care most about his ink drawings.
Mm-hmm.
But Crumb, he didn't really care about them. I mean, why should you as a comic artist? I mean, they're just what you do and what is turned into a print.
Yeah.
And in fact, comic artists today, they won't have ink drawings because they do everything on their computer.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting question. How important is he as an artist? Is he, should we look at him in the sphere of fine art, or does this discussion of is it art even matter?
I think the thing about original art, original ink drawings per se, I mean, it's a big thing in like comic fan circles still. I mean, they can go like even not within the fine art world, as in like his representative is Zwirner, but like other famous comic artists who's not really in the fine art world, but their original drawings are still very, very valuable.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think these are like very valuable collectibles in any case, whether it's fine art or not. But
like how significant are they? Maybe, I mean, because in a way they're just a working stage in the production of a comic, which is the final product.
I think as collectibles, they're still valuable.
Yeah, for sure.
They're going to be valuable, and in terms of the artistic values, they are definitely valuable. But whether to consider Robert Crumb within the context of fine art or not, I think that's a question perhaps that theorists and curators might care more about, but I don't think necessarily matters for Crumb.
I don't think it matters for him personally. I mean, he's just doing fine either way, although he does care about how people think of him, and I think he has this kind of sense of, I mean, obviously he's been a highly prolific, very dedicated artist. He does care about his afterlife.
Yeah, for sure.
An awful lot. And I think it is a relevant point to ask because, frankly, in this world, whether you are producing, whether your most memorable works is like collectibles fandom or whether it's fine art, it makes a crucial difference. I mean, in fact, even though Robert is considered crucially important art historically within the history of culture, particularly in America, his work has not to this day been collected very widely in museums. I mean, you have works, I think, in MoMA and the Brooklyn Museum, and in the Art Institute of Chicago, but you don't have it in all the important institutions. I don't think there's anything in the National Gallery in Washington. There's certainly nothing in Tate. And so I think that the distinction matters because, frankly...
I think in a way, it's kind of nice that they're not in the museums, I find. Not everything has to be in the museum and be categorized as fine art, I think. I mean, there's nothing wrong with just being a great comic artist, and the prestige you get, it does not mean it's less than a fine artist, I find. The amount of people that like your work, and the influence you have on people by being a comic artist is gigantic. I mean, how many people knows and are all deeply touched by, I don't know, George Condo? And how many people are deeply...
Well, maybe George Condo is a bad example because he is also not in many museum collections, even though his prices might suggest otherwise. He is, in fact, not to this day collected very well. I mean, I think MoMA have like one work probably as a gift from someone...
Okay, Joseph Beuys.
Okay.
How many people are deeply touched by Joseph Beuys?
Well, I guess that's also a generational question. I mean, if you ask my father, he might say that he's profoundly influential. And,
but like how many people literally are actually touched by Joseph Beuys?
I think many would consider touching, but yeah, I get your point.
By like the general public, not like people in the art world.
Yeah, but you might also quite reasonably ask, why can't Crumb be both, be considered a crucially important comic artist and have like this public element, and also be in the pantheon of art? You have precedents. I mean, in fact, also the distinction between comic and art, you might call it into question. I mean, obviously, really, if you go back in history, you might think that, Crumb is carrying the legacy of William Hogarth, who would also extend the boundaries of social decency and question, poke fun at the incredulous private life of Britons in the 18th century. And yet, you have paintings by Hogarth in the National Gallery.
I mean, yes, of course. I understand what you're getting, but the question you're asking, your pre-existing assumption is that fine art is higher than comics.
But why can't you? Well, I think it's different spheres. But why can't he have a foot in both spheres? Or should he have that?
I mean, sure he can. I mean, I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying it doesn't have to. We don't have to push for it in a way, I think. I mean, if it happens, it happens. But I think there's something very in a way fundamentally different in what, let's say, underground comic is and what fine art is in terms of the way people perceive them. A lot of people wouldn't want to look at fine art, but they would like to look at a comic.
Yeah.
If it's this, like, I think also in the interview, Robert also said, like, my work is supposed to be printed, and that's why he still insists to have his work printed and have them made into comic books.
Yeah.
And it's not supposed to be viewed on gallery walls.
I mean, he's of course deeply cynical of many of these galleries, and so in a way...
No, but in general, it is not supposed to be viewed on gallery walls, in a sense, right?
Well, in a way, it's quite remarkable that he's been represented by David Zwirner for so many years, when yet... But no, it's quite striking. I mean,
no, but I mean, from what he said in his own interview, he's just like, yeah, but Zwirner's a nice guy, and he doesn't force me to do works, and he pays me, take care of me. That's great.
Well, I guess maybe there's that element. I mean, idealism has its limits. I think he's also in a way a deeply passive person, and he just plays along with the tides of life, and of course,
I think so.
That has served him very well.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with taking the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's one thing to be a comic artist and have your original drawings be appreciated and admired and displayed in gallery walls. And it's another thing to, I don't know, be a fine artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a certain lines, and I don't feel like have to be like breaking that boundary sort of thing. I think if it happens naturally, then that's great.
Yeah.
I think comic artists are artists who are really should be. I mean, they're very really creative and great artists in themselves.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways that sometimes not all art forms have to be timeless, I think.
No, of course. I don't think so, yeah.
Yeah, and being in the museum, you're either dead or you're timeless, the works in the museum.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't have to be in a museum, maybe.
Oh.
And he's had a great influence on generations of people, and that's great enough.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
So, on that note... we'll look forward to your brilliant show of Boswell's Journal.
Yes,
by Robert Crumb.
Well, it will feature his illustrations of James Boswell's London Journal. So it's this Scottish gentleman, bachelor, who comes to London and is very much torn between, pious and intellectual pursuits and powerful, inner nature. He has sex with prostitutes, catches gonorrhea. And so this is a journal written in the 18th century, and Crumb then went on to illustrate that journal. And of course, Boswell was a highly intriguing character to him, because I think he also saw himself in that character, really. I mean, first of all, his journal is very honest and, reports all of his inner life, his ambitions. And I think the journal also explores weakness of the will, how, oftentimes we have a certain idealized picture of ourselves, say with intellectual and pious ambitions and being among scholarly circles, and then a more base human nature which might involve having sex with an ugly, drunken prostitute in St. James's Park. And I think that very much appealed to Crumb. And so, I don't want to say too much, but I very much look forward to showing that important work. And
And it will be opening in November in London.
Yes.
In a gallery called
Cassius&co.
Great. Okay. Thank you for listening.